Coming up on Talking Points, angry protests from residents and a shelter closed where Syracuse falls in the immigration debate. And midterm elections are heating up. We'll take a look at what candidates are saying about the issues that affect you most. Also, President Obama has revealed his strategy to combat the Islamic State. But does he have international support? Talking Point starts right now. Good evening, hello, and welcome to another edition of Talking Points. I'm Nick Cardona. Our top story is the Obama administration's response to the Islamic State and its attempt to rally international support.
We will conduct a systematic campaign of airstrikes against these terrorists. Working with the Iraqi government, we will expand our efforts beyond protecting our own people and humanitarian missions so that we're hitting ISIL targets as Iraqi forces go on offense. Moreover, I've made it clear that we will hunt down terrorists who threaten our country wherever they are. That means I will not hesitate to take action against ISIL in Syria as well as Iraq. This is a core principle of my presidency. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven.
Joining us now to talk more about the president's speech and his ISIS strategy is Talking Points correspondent John Tomino and Zach Zelif, executive board member of LIME, an Israeli-Palestinian dialogue group. Guys, good evening to you.
Good evening.
So I want to start out with the president's speech and get your reaction, John and Zach, to what the president had to say about his plans going forward.
Well, perhaps nobody can say it better than the president himself about just the way he wants to combat ISIS. It's a systematic approach, and you can really divide it into about 4 prongs. The first one will consist of money from Congress, which is going to go towards arming and training the Free Syrian Army to combating ISIS in Syria. The second prong will, of course, be humanitarian assistance. The third, reinforcing the commitment to counterterrorism strategies in the Middle East. And the fourth will be more airstrikes in Iraq and possibly even in Syria, as the president indicated he's willing to go anywhere that ISIS is. It's a very similar strategy to the one that the U.S. has taken in Somalia right now, where they're using heavy intelligence to go after leaders that are in terrorist groups there. So that's what we can expect from the United States and the Middle East as far as now what the strategy is.
Zach, what was your reaction to the president's speech?
I thought it was all right. I thought it was a little bit vague intentionally. I don't think he wants to give away his grand strategic plan. I don't think he knows how it's going to go yet in terms of airstrikes and in terms of arming the Free Syrian Army. I wish he took a lot of these actions earlier, especially in Syria. The Free Syrian Army at this point is very depleted. It has had a lot of defections to groups such as ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra, and they've been defeated by the Assad army in many areas. I wish he armed them a little bit earlier, but I'm glad he's addressing it now, and I think it's time to really take some action against ISIS.
So the next step for this strategy, I mean, you know, the last 2 years of Obama's presidency, you want to have Congress, he wants to have Congress behind him on this. What are the next steps that he has to take, but also that, you know, the Congress has to take to kind of move this strategy forward and hopefully make a dent in the mission before President Obama leaves office?
Well, it remains to be seen what Congress is going to be able to do right now. Of course, midterm elections are in November. A lot of people who are incumbents are on the hot seat. They're probably going to be dedicating most of their time to re-election efforts. After the dust settles post-election, we'll definitely see something happen, I think at least, in regards to an official authorization vote, because Congress, especially Democratic members of Congress and the Senate, are on board with Obama's strategy. But if he's going to have a prolonged military action in Iraq and Syria, they're going to want to be consulted through an authorization of military force. Now, if that happens, keep in mind last year, President Obama wanted to get a similar authorization to do airstrikes in Syria. That was shot down. It was kind of an embarrassing defeat for him. He definitely doesn't want that to happen again.
Now, Zach, I want to ask you about support in the Middle East. Do you think the president and this kind of coalition that he mentioned in the speech, do they have the support they need in the Middle East?
I think they're getting it from a lot of different sources. The question is how much money and if they can cobble together actors who are normally very wary of working with each other. For example, the Kurds in northern Iraq have been a large force in fighting back ISIS, specifically at the Mosul Dam, a big military victory from the U.S. from those airstrikes already. But they're also going to need help from Turkey. The border between Turkey and Syria has been very porous, and that's originally how a lot of the ISIS members got into Syria in the first place. Traditionally, Turkey and the Kurds have been very at odds with each other. There's a strong Kurdish presence in Turkey, and they've in the past tried to have a separationist movement, and that's really made the Turkish government afraid of working with the Kurds in any situation. Then there's Saudi Arabia and Iran, who have been lifelong enemies since the revolution in Iran, and getting all these different groups to work together is going to be very difficult, but all groups are against ISIS. It's just trying to get everyone to work together and commit the forces necessary to be effective against ISIS.
I want to get to a larger political point. 2016 is coming up. How is this reaction, how is this strategy going to affect candidates that are they haven't announced, no candidates has announced they're running for president yet, but how is that going to affect their chances, both Republican and Democrat? John?
Well, if you're looking at this from a Democratic point of view, the Democratic Party should be behind what President Barack Obama is selling. As a new CNN poll indicates, 37% of Americans are behind what President Obama is trying to do to combat ISIS. It's not a large amount, but if you look at some of the other things, 3/4 of Americans are in favor of airstrikes. 83% are in favor of humanitarian aid. So there is a support base for what President Obama is proposing, and if a successor turns out to be a Democrat, I think that'll bode well for them. What Republicans have been saying, especially Republicans that are in Congress, GOP leader Kevin McCarthy sent out this tweet, said we must recognize ISIL is but a symptom of broader terrorist threat that must be destroyed. So you're going to definitely see them being critical of what President Obama is doing, and they're going to be advocating probably their own strategy. So we'll see how that pays off for them as things go forward towards 2016.
All right. And also, I mean, there was a CNN poll that was out, I believe it was a CNN poll, that Americans are more fearful now than they were pre-9/11, I believe it was. So I think that's an important issue to point out as well. And
again, that may be the news media right there, because there's definitely a lot more attention now on the Middle East, on terrorist groups, than there was before 9/11, 13 years ago today. So it's definitely it's been a big change, but that's probably why some of those findings have been the way that they are.
All right. John, Zach, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, President Obama has decided to postpone any action on immigration. Coming up, why the issue is at the forefront here in Syracuse. Stay with us.
Now it's time for This Week in Bad Stats.
Bad stats?
Horrible stats. Here goes. 132.
That's how many batters struck out 4 times in one game last season.
Wow, very good. Here's a tough one, though. 3 and 4.
No idea.
That's how many kids witness bullying. 3 out of 4.
That's not a good stat.
No, it's not, but it can change. Kids want to help, but they don't know how. Visit stopbullying.gov and give them the tools they need to help prevent bullying.
There are plenty of safe ways kids can help at stopbullying.gov.
In 1977, an 8-year-old boy picked up the game of golf from his father. The odds of that same boy then making it to the US and European pro golf tours, 1 in 7 million. The odds of the Big Easy winning the US Open twice, 1 in 1.2 billion. The odds of him having a child diagnosed with autism, 1 in 110. Ernie Els encourages you to learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
Today, about 1 in 5 Americans is living with a disability. Over 50 million people, including many of our friends and neighbors, teachers and co-workers, heroes and leaders. 20 years ago, the Americans with Disabilities Act guaranteed every person the right to live, work, and participate fully in the American experience. We've come a long way since then, and we are committed to making even more progress in the years ahead. Visit disability.gov to see how you can help.
Welcome back to Talking Points. The immigration debate is at the forefront in Washington. However, right here in Syracuse, there is an even bigger local problem facing unaccompanied minors. Joining us now is Talking Points correspondent Will Gerhard. Will, good evening to you.
Nick, pleasure to be here.
Now, I want to start out with this issue that has been going on nationally and locally in this area. How long is this going on? Mentioned that it was going on since the summer. How big of a national issue is this?
Well, Nick, of course, border control has been a huge national issue for a number of years now. It's been a platform that many politicians have stuck on when they've been running for different seats in the House and as well as the presidency at large. But the most recent issue started earlier this summer in about July when there were unaccompanied refugee children coming across the border, most of which from Central America, from the countries of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. It's become such a huge issue with the United States that there's over 57,000 children who have come over from these Central American countries unaccompanied for. Congress never acted on this, and because they didn't, President Obama was left with sole responsibility for the issue.
So you mentioned to me earlier that he's, obviously the news came out that he's going to wait until after the election to address an immigration crisis, especially, nationally. Do you think that's a smart move by him politically, or what do you think about that move?
Well, Nick, that is correct. He's waiting until after the midterm elections in early November, and that's the decision he made, but honestly, it's a huge issue that's affecting the entire country, and it's being delayed for over about another month and a half. It's something that is really only going to get worse if it's not combated soon enough. President Obama's stance on it was that he said he couldn't do anything without Congress. He said he needed Congress to do it. In June, he announced that he'd ask Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson and Attorney General Eric Holder to present a list of executive actions he could take within the scope of his authority to modernize and streamline U.S. immigration policy. Again, Congress hasn't helped him with this, so he left it by himself, and no action has been taken.
What about the legal ramifications of this? What are there legal ramifications, and if so, what are they?
Well, I think the biggest thing for at least us in Syracuse is because we're not getting the city's not getting any funding from the national government, so all these temporary shelters are going under. The city is being hit very hard, and citizens in Syracuse are taking this really hard. At town hall meetings, there's been protests. There have been some town hall meetings that have gotten so crowded that they've had to do a second edition of them. There was a shelter being built by St. Francis, the Sisters of St. Francis, in Syracuse, but because, again, no funding, they were unable to do it. Mayor Minor urged President Obama over and over again to help her out, to help the city out with this. But again, no response thus far.
Now, what's next for Syracuse? Where do we go from here with this debate? What happens next?
Well, I'll tell you this. The city is certainly not giving up on this fight until all of these refugees are housed and accounted for. It started out in Syracuse earlier in the summer when there were refugees coming down from Fort Drum, from the military base at Fort Drum. Mayor Minor is very supportive of these refugees. She says that they're not aliens, they're refugees. In fact, in a quote, she said, "The city of Syracuse is proud of its long history of welcoming immigrants and refugees. Our neighborhoods are becoming richer and more diverse every day with a new generation of refugees from Asia and Africa. We are growing our economy with the skills of immigrants at our hospitals and universities. New Americans will always be central to our city, and we look forward to the opportunity to welcome more to the community." So Mayor Minor certainly is asking for help, but yet again, no response from the national government.
What about the conditions of these these refugee camps, if you want to call them? What are they terrible conditions, and if so, what are they doing to fix these conditions?
Well, right now, because funding is so low, or in some cases non-existent, they don't have the resources necessary to help fix these shelters. They're not in awful condition. They can house most refugees for up to 35 days at a time, which is a pretty substantial amount of time.
What happens after those 35 days, though?
After those 35 days, I think the refugees have to go on and seek new shelter. Of course, if there was more shelters in Syracuse, they'd have more options, and they'd be able to expand where they could go and stay until they could figure out their own personal situations. But for the time being, that's where it stands in Syracuse.
So, what are the chances? Turning now to the national aspect of immigration,
Sure.
what are the chances that anything gets done after the midterms? Obviously, President Obama wants to wait until after the midterms, but then you have that lame duck session of Congress that they don't take office until January. So, what happens? Is there a chance that something gets done?
Well, I'll tell you this much. Like you said, there's that lame duck this period of time where Congress doesn't come into office until January, and for that reason, I don't think we can expect anything to get done until January. Especially with all the new developments in the Middle East with ISIS and the various groups over there, and President Obama's new stance and plan to combat those missions, I think it is very unlikely that he will approach this issue head on before then.
All right. Well, Gerhard, thank you so much. An issue that we're going to be following throughout the year. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
All right. Coming up, we're talking Decision 2014 and some big races you might want to keep an eye on. Stay with us.
Know what?
What?
Since I got adopted, I've learned a lot about these humans.
I know. I mean, check out these two. It's Flirt City over here.
Yeah, I noticed that. It looks like my human is definitely into your human.
Oh, look! I think she's getting his number.
Nice.
Your human's got some sweet moves.
Takes after his dog. Oh, look, they're doing that thing where they put their arms around each other.
She kicked up a leg. It's like in the movies.
That's awesome. Looks like we're gonna be hanging out a little bit more.
My dad's one of the producers over there. Bring this sweet.
Talking points. With just under 2 months until Election Day, Republicans and Democrats are fighting for control of Congress. Joining us now is Talking Points correspondent Alex Amico. Alex, good evening to you.
Good evening, Nick.
So I want to start out with right here at home, the 24th Congressional District, Dan Maffei versus John Katko. What's the story going on there? Is it a competitive race? What's going on?
So the race is pretty competitive. Right now, Katko is basically trying to portray Maffei as a D.C. insider. One of his quotes has been, the only district he cares about is the District of Columbia. He's also said what a lot of Republicans are saying about Democrats this election cycle, which is he's been criticizing Dan Maffei for his vote for the Affordable Care Act. It is an uphill battle for Katko, though. In a poll taken in August, he was down by 7 points to Maffei, and 36% of likely voters didn't even know who he was. So it's an uphill climb for him to unseat Maffei.
You definitely have to have some type of name recognition to do well. Maffei, how is he responding to these attacks? I mean, this guy has gone back and forth from being in Congress to not being in Congress. Now he's back in Congress. I mean, how is he responding to these attacks?
So he's doing what a lot of Democrats are doing at the national level, which is he's portraying Katko as anti-family and anti-woman. A big motto for the Democrats in the midterms is the GOP war on women, so to speak. So his latest ad has been he hit Katko for his opposition to the Paycheck Fairness Act. So that's really where Maffei is going. He's trying to cast Katko as anti-family, anti-women. And right now he's leading in the polls, but it's a race definitely worth following until November.
All right, so now I want to turn to a statewide race. This is a very important statewide race to us, at least. Andrew Cuomo, he won the Democratic primary by 35 points, which honestly, I mean, Zephyr Teachout, the other Democratic candidate, she got a lot more votes than people expected her to get. What's the story? What's the story in that race? How's he look going into the general?
Well, the general election is a foregone conclusion. He's going to beat Rob Astorino pretty handily. Most polls have him up by at least 25, some by over 30. Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1 in New York State. The bigger story really is the strong primary challenge from Zephyr Teachout. She got 35% of the vote in the primary, and a big reason for that is people on the left are dissatisfied with Cuomo. He had three major labor organizations endorsed him in his first run for governor back in 2010. And that was the AFL-CIO, the New York State United Teachers, and the Public Employee Federation. The AFL-CIO and the NYSUT didn't make an endorsement during the primary, and the PEF actually endorsed Teachout. So really what this is, Cuomo's name has come up before as a potential presidential candidate. So I think the big takeaway is concerned that national Democrats may be concerned that he can't rally these core groups of the Democratic base, and I think it calls his national future into question.
Now, I mean, we talked a lot about Rob Astorino and his Republican challenger, in the general election. Now, he has been kind of criticized a lot, and he criticized Governor Christie, the chairman of the Republican Governors Association, for not helping him out in his race because he basically doesn't campaign for lost causes. What do you think that has anything to do with it? Both candidates are struggling in terms of getting endorsements from their respective leaders of their parties. So how does Cuomo react to this? How does he go forward and try to maintain his image as a possible national candidate?
Well, one of the nice things for Cuomo, at least, is that his running mate did win the election for lieutenant governor. The lieutenant governor's race did have a challenge on the left. So I think the positive would be for Cuomo to play up his experience as an executive, play up his executive experience as running a state, and maybe try to somehow quiet those voices on the left that are voicing concern with him.
All right, well, that's a race that we're going to keep an eye on, obviously, right up until the general election, because it's a very important race statewide. So I want to turn now to Congress, and this is decision for 2014. This is a big year, possibly for Republicans, that they could take over the Senate, or take over the House, or the Senate. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Senate.
And so, what are some races that are important in your mind?
So, if you take a look at the board right now, Republicans need to pick up 6 formerly held Democratic seats and defend all of their seats in order to take back the Senate. These are 3 former Democratic seats that they are going to win. They're going to win West Virginia. They're going to win Montana, of course, where Senator John Walsh dropped out after a plagiarism scandal. Yep. And they're going to win South Dakota. These 7 races are all pretty competitive. Most of them are within the margin of error. That's Alaska, Arkansas, Georgia, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, and North Carolina. Now, Georgia is an open seat formerly held by a Republican, Saxby Chambliss, who's retiring. And Kentucky, of course, is Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. So Republicans need to defend those 2 seats, and they need to pick up 3 of the remaining 5 Democratic-held seats.
Now, Georgia, the Democratic candidate is Michelle Nunn, so and she also has some political history as well in that state, right?
That's correct. Her father was a longtime senator, Sam Nunn from Georgia, a longtime Democratic senator. That's a Democrat's best chance to flip a state. Georgia is their best chance to win a state held by a Republican. One local poll in Georgia has it within 2 points. Michelle Nunn is doing very well among women in Georgia, so that could give them a little bit of breathing room as far as holding on to the majority, but it's really tight for Democrats going into November.
And Louisiana is going to be the deciding factor. You said earlier it could be the deciding factor.
Right. Louisiana is pretty close right now. Bill Cassidy is running against the Democratic incumbent Mary Landrieu, and Landrieu is playing up she's trying to portray herself as independent of the National Party, but not really going so well. Cassidy's doing a pretty good job of connecting her to national Democrats who are unpopular in Louisiana, but she's trying to portray her stance as chair of the Energy Committee and try to say that she can bring jobs to Louisiana. But the big thing in Louisiana is their election system is a jungle primary. So what that means is all the candidates are on the same ballot in the general election. All Republicans, all Democrats, all independents, all third party, same ballot. So if a candidate gets a majority vote, they win the election outright. If no one gets a majority vote, which is a distinct possibility, then it goes to a December runoff. What that means is, depending on how Republicans do in these other races, we may not know who controls the Senate until December. And if that runoff happens, you can expect both sides to pour a lot of money into the Bayou State.
That's going to be an interesting month to follow. Now, the other thing, we talked about ISIS earlier in the broadcast. Now, I want to see the major issues that are going to be facing in this election season. Is it ISIS? Is it national security? Is it foreign policy? What are the major issues going forward?
A lot of Democrats are trying to distance themselves from President Obama. Their votes for the Affordable Care Act has actually been a bit of a liability in a lot of states, especially Arkansas. Senator Mark Pryor is the most vulnerable incumbent, and Tom Cotton's really been hammering on him, and Tom Cotton's probably going to win Arkansas. And actually, just recently, Senator Mark Begich from Alaska, Democratic incumbent running against Dan Sullivan, a Republican in a pretty deep red state, just after President Obama announced his strategy, Begich really quickly distanced himself from it. So that is really starting to define these midterms. Is a lot of Democratic incumbents are distancing themselves from the president, which doesn't really bode well for the last 2 years of his presidency.
All right. Well, we're going to be following that up until the midterms, and hopefully, Alex Amico and your whiteboard. Thank you so much. When we come back, a different take on an important issue facing our community. Stay with us.
Packers, Viking, Packers, Viking, Viking.
Red state, blue state, vegan,
Carnivore.
We come from different places.
Uptown,
downtown,
Night owl,
early bird.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty,
half full.
But when we live united, we create real, lasting change in the building blocks of life. The education, income, and health of our communities,
Live
our families,
united.
Even the person next to us.
Live united.
Real change won't happen without you. So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up at liveunited.org.
Welcome to my block party. Glad you can make it.
The only triple doubles you get come with fries.
Last time you blocked someone, you were online.
I can do this all day. Your moves are just gay.
Using gay to mean dumb or stupid, not cool.
Not cool.
Not in my house, not anywhere. It's not creative, it's offensive to gay people. And you're better than that.
up 6 stairs takes determination. So will getting into college. I've got what it takes. So do you.
Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper. As a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. Well, teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Finally tonight, I want to touch on a story that is getting a lot of media attention in this community in the last week, but for the wrong reasons. Hannah Strong, a student athlete here at Syracuse, was caught saying both racist and homophobic slurs towards another student. The whole event was captured on video and went directly viral. The response to these comments came from not only our students, but also from students across the country. All of these responses were extremely passionate, but again, not for the right reasons. People all over campus are calling for Hannah Strong to be expelled and kicked out of the university for her comments. However, few people are talking about what exactly the issue is. The fact that this language is used on campuses all over the country every single day. Now, I'm going to say something that many people will probably disagree with. Hannah Strong is a distraction, a scapegoat for the larger issue that really should be dominating headlines across the country. Her comments were wrong, and for all I know, she should and will be punished, but that should be a side note, not a headline. Public discussions, community forums, and open access to professional advocacy throughout the university should dominate our reaction to this story. Should people be upset at Hannah Strong? Yes. Should people demand an on-camera apology from Hannah Strong instead of a PR statement in the Daily Orange? Yes. All of these things should happen, but the question we all need to ask is what happens next? Are we going to talk about Hannah Strong for a couple more weeks and post more statuses on Facebook demanding her removal from the university and then forget about it? We shouldn't. She is not the problem. The problem is the language and the meaning behind the language. The problem does not stop at the edge of our campus. It does not stop at the edges of campuses across the country. It is a problem that exists everywhere. And until we start talking about the issues and stop talking exclusively about the people behind the comments, we can then accurately answer the question, what happens next? It's a story that we're going to face all throughout the semester, including the Advocacy Center closing and the many criticisms that are facing this university, from the #1 party school ranking to domestic violence and Advocacy Center around this campus and campuses across the country. So it's an important issue. We'll be following that all semester. That is going to be our broadcast for this week. Thank you all so much for joining us. We hope to see you next week for an all-new edition of Talking Points. Make sure you visit our Facebook page for all things political. If it's Sunday, it's Talking Points.